All right, we're about to take a high-speed journey through 500 years of history. We're going to try and understand the soul of one of the world's most fascinating and complex nations, Brazil. Let's dive right in. So, this is the big question we're tackling, right? How did this one single massive country become a place of such huge contrasts? You've got carnivals and crises, rainforests and favelas, all side by side. It's a story of incredible beauty, some real brutality, and just unbelievable resilience. To even begin to find the answer, you have to start at the very beginning, back in the colonial era. Because, the DNA of modern Brazil, its culture, its economy, and its deepest, most painful inequalities, it was all coded right here, from the start. Now, this is really important to grasp. Before any European ships ever hit the shore, this was not an empty land. Not at all. It was a world just teeming with life, home to hundreds of distinct indigenous nations, a place where over 1,000 different languages were spoken. It was a world with a deep, spiritual connection to nature. Then in 1500, the Portuguese arrive, and everything changes. The economy they built was all about extraction, one cycle after another. First, it was the pau-brasil wood, which is actually where the country gets its name. Then came the era of massive sugar plantations. And after that, a frantic, full-blown gold and diamond rush. And this entire colonial engine, it was powered by human beings. Just look at this number, 4 million. That is the estimated number of enslaved Africans brought to Brazil. That's more than any other single country in the Americas. This is the brutal foundation that so much of the nation was built on. But here's where the story takes a turn, and this is absolutely crucial. From this unimaginable tragedy, something powerful and totally unique was born. It's this fusion, this blend of African, European, and indigenous traditions that created the very soul of Brazilian culture that we know today. You hear it in the rhythms of samba, you see it in the dance-like fight of capoeira, and you feel it in the spiritual richness of candomblé. So let's move into the next phase. This is where Brazil starts to pull away from Portugal and really forge its own identity, and it does it in a very strange way, as an empire in the New World. The very first real seeds of rebellion, they were planted in the gold-rich lands of Minas Gerais. Now, the Inconfidência Mineira was crushed, and its leader, a man named Tiradentes, was executed. But he wasn't forgotten. He became Brazil's first great national symbol of the fight for freedom. And then comes one of the weirdest and most important moments in world history. Seriously, Napoleon invades Portugal, so what does the entire Portuguese royal court do? They pack up their bags and flee to Rio de Janeiro. Just like that, a colony becomes the center of a European empire. This event changed absolutely everything. Well, eventually the court went back to Portugal, but the king left his son, Dom Pedro, behind. When he was pressured to bring Brazil back under colonial control, he basically said, no way. On September 7th, 1822, he delivered this famous cry, independence or death, and declared Brazil an independent nation. And this just shows you how unique Brazil's path was. While all its neighbors were fighting bloody wars to become republics, Brazil became an empire. And under its second emperor, Dom Pedro II, the country actually had this incredible 50-year stretch of stability, modernization, and a real cultural boom. But hanging over this entire period was the institution of slavery. Finally, in 1888, the Golden Law was signed, abolishing it for good. Brazil was the very last nation in the Americas to do so. It was a massive victory for human rights. But for the monarchy, which depended on the support of the slave-owning elites, it was the final nail in the coffin. Just 1 year later, the empire was gone. And with the monarchy gone, Brazil tumbles into its next chapter. A chaotic, often violent, but totally transformative 20th century. A time just filled with revolutions and strong men. So this first republic, it was hardly a democracy for everybody. Real power was held tight by regional elites, specifically the powerful coffee barons from São Paulo and the big cattle ranchers from Minas Gerais. They called it the Coffee with Milk Republic, and this alliance made sure that wealth and political control stayed in the hands of a very select few. All that inequality paved the way for a man who really is the embodiment of Brazil's contradictions, Getúlio Vargas. I mean, he was two completely different things at the same time. On one hand, he was a populist hero, the father of the poor, who pushed for industrialization and gave new rights to workers. But on the other hand, he was a harsh, authoritarian dictator. And this pattern of extremes, it got even more stark in 1964, when the military seized power. For 21 years, the country lived this bizarre contradiction. On one side, you had this huge economic boom. They called it the Brazilian miracle. But on the other side, you had brutal political repression, intense censorship, torture, and disappearances. But you can only silence people for so long. In the early 1980s, the people's demand for freedom just exploded. Millions, literally millions of Brazilians poured into the streets in this massive movement called Diretas Já, which means direct elections now. And you know what? It worked. The pressure was too much, and in 1985, democracy was finally restored. Okay, this brings us to our final section. Let's look at how this long, turbulent history has shaped the democratic and, the deeply divided Brazil of today. The last 30 years or so have been an absolute roller coaster. I mean, you've had incredible highs, like finally stabilizing the economy and lifting tens of millions of people out of poverty. Brazil took center stage, hosting the World Cup and the Olympics. But then, the lows. A mind-boggling corruption scandal, the impeachment of a president, and just intense political polarization that has swung the country from the left to the far right and back again. So after all of that, what is Brazil? I think this quote really gets to the heart of it. It's a nation that is defined by both its incredible joy and its constant struggle. It's a country that rose from the ashes of its history to dance and sing and dream on the world stage. If there's one thing its history shows us, it's that Brazil is a nation forged in contradiction, and it's capable of constantly reinventing itself. And that leaves us with the final, biggest question of all. What on earth will its next chapter hold?